Hey, everybody, and welcome to our latest edition of Shank's Summer Children's Lit Fun Time Hour. I'm actually recording this on Thursday morning, and I will then promptly turn it into a YouTube video and have it ready for you, hopefully by noon. Usually, I record these things like the day before or as late as the night before, but for various reasons, I decided to wait until this morning to do that. Among other reasons why. Um, to keep you updated on the Chelsea front. I dropped her off this morning at 8 o'clock so that she could have her major surgery. Um, and so it's a very momentous day for her and for me. So I dropped her off at 8 o'clock, and I'm supposed to come get her between 4 and 5 this afternoon. So the house is pretty quiet. It's quiet for the first time in like 2 weeks. So anyway, that's the newest on the Chelsea front. A couple of things I wanted to do today. I wanted to explain and preview the midterm exam that you will be taking. Obviously, in a non-synchronous online class, we have to do it a little bit differently than we would if it's a normal situation. So I'm going to explain the procedure and what we're going to do. And then basically, the key day will be Sunday. You'll have a 24-hour window to take the midterm exam and then email it to me by midnight on Sunday night. So I ask you to look over the midterm study guide that's in the Canvas, and I'll go over that in a little bit briefly as well. And obviously, if you have any questions between now and Sunday about the midterm exam that are not made clear to you in this video, please contact me, and I will be glad to answer those. Um, then I want to share with you your comments on the fairy tale collection. I have all those compiled and put in Canvas. And then the other reason I wanted to wait till this morning is I wanted to compile, I think a couple came in a little late, so they're not there. But I also wanted to compile and share with you today your answers to the folktale analysis that you did, looking over those YouTube video versions of the folktales. And so I have those compiled, and those are in Canvas. So I'll take a little bit of time to share those with you today as well. So that's what's on tap for today. Um, Oh, I might as well share this with you before we go on. This is in my Facebook. Um, I had Sunrise on the Reaping uh, on hold in my library, but there were like 30 holds for the book. So I thought this is going to take forever for me to get it through the library. So I finally broke down and bought a copy on Amazon, and it came the other day. And there's Chelsea checking it out. So I haven't had a chance to start reading it yet. If any of you have read the Hunger Games trilogy and have also read Sunrise on the Reaping, let me know what you thought of it. I don't mind plot spoilers or whatever. I'm the kind of person who, before he goes to see a movie, I like to read the reviews, and I like to know what's going on and what people think of it. And so I hear good things about it. And of course, it focuses on probably my favorite character in the whole series, other than Katniss, and that's Haymitch. So it's apparently Haymitch's story, and so I'm looking forward to reading that if Chelsea will give me a chance to read that. So anyway, um, that's that. All right, let me share with you the homework. And the homework is basically uh, to get ready for and to take the midterm exam. So here we go. So by midnight on Sunday, here's what I want you to do. Obviously, watch this lecture as you always have from Thursday, July 10th. And Then your main homework as far as to turn in something will be the midterm exam itself. There's no other assignment or whatever. Um, and you will treat it like you do the other assignments you turn in to me, which is you'll turn in the assignment to me in a Word document and then also include the numbers in the sequence of this video. And while I'm thinking about it, I might as well give you the first number. I had it written out here. 32. 32 is your first number today. So when you turn in the your answers to the midterm questions Sunday by midnight, um, also include the numbers in the sequence. And you know, I've taken the writing assignments late. I haven't been too much of a stickler about that. If somebody, I know all of these are technically due on by midnight on either Sunday or Wednesday, depending. But I've been pretty lenient about some things turned in a little bit later than that. But I really will be a stickler about you turning in your answers to the midterm by midnight on Sunday. So like I said, there will be a 24-hour window. On midnight on Sunday, I will unpublish the midterm exam. So if you haven't taken it by then, you won't be able to take it. So you have a 24-hour window, like I said. Okay, so here is the procedure we're going to follow, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the study guide in a minute. All right, I will post the midterm exam at midnight on Saturday and leave it up until Sunday midnight. So you have all day Sunday to do it and email your answers back to me by midnight, Word document. All right, and again, I'm not timing the exam as such. I wish I could. I wish this were at least a synchronous class that we all met at a set time and I could say, okay, you all have an hour to do this, have at it, and then turn it into me. I've when I taught this course online during COVID, it at least was synchronous, so you had some semblance of a class period. And of course, we can't do that. All right. So I'm not timing the exam, but I will be unpublishing everything in Canvas that's relevant to what we've done the first uh, 3 weeks of class. Basically, anything that's relevant to any information that might be on the midterm, I will unpublish. So it will no longer be available on after midnight on Saturday through midnight on Sunday. It's as close as I can get to, you know, making it, otherwise it would just be an open book, open note, open canvas kind of exam. And I wanted to make it at least a little bit challenging for you. All right. So as it says here, this is as close as I can make it to a regular in-class exam. Um, so you do have to study for it, hopefully, like students would in a classroom setting, or it's as close as I can make it to a classroom setting. So on at midnight, I keep wanting to say on midnight. I don't know why I'm doing that. At midnight on Saturday, I will post the midterm exam and I will unpublish everything else. So you're on your own for that day. Okay. It says refer to the midterm study guide for the format. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute and the material that you are responsible for. Also, pay particular note of the articles in the packet that I have assigned and you are responsible for. I say this in all my lit classes, you know, in Canvas, in the packet section of the Canvas particularly, you know, I will assign articles for you to read. And we don't spend any time, if at all, in class talking about the articles. You're just responsible for reading them. Um, I always thought it was somewhat of a waste of time in certain literature classes to have students read an article and then I know you read it, I know you understood it, and then to take time in class talking about it. So I just expect you to read the articles and be familiar with them and be able to summarize the main points of the articles. So even though we haven't talked about them in class, You are responsible for them. And the reason I point this out is usually if people do poorly on a midterm or a final exam, it's because they don't do well on the questions regarding the any article I might have had you read. So I'm just kind of warning you about that ahead of time. All right. Um, Also, very important, and these are now posted on Canvas. The other thing you should read before Saturday midnight is do read the student presentations uh, for picture books and for folk tales, fairy tales, and myths, that section. So those are now posted. I think there are 5 student presentations for picture books, and there are 5 student presentations in the folk fairy tale myth group. Because there will be a question uh, on the midterm on student presentations. So as I mentioned, I believe the very first day of class, I said you are responsible for being familiar with what has been presented by students. Now, again, in a regular classroom, we actually take time in class to have the students actually present their work in class, and students take notes, and then that becomes a part of the midterm. And again, we can't do that in an online class, but I think the next best thing is to actually post uh, the presentations and have you read them and be familiar with them as if they were, part of the curriculum or if they were articles you were reading in the packet or whatever. And I actually have these on tap too. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on them because like I said, I want you to read these, but I will alert you to where you can find them and show you these. And I've read and graded all of the ones in the picture book category, and they all were excellent. And the folktale, fairy tale, myth ones have just been coming in, and I have them posted in Canvas. But for the 4 students who have turned those in, give me some time on those. It usually takes me a little time to read and grade the presentations. So I haven't graded them yet, but they are posted in Canvas. All right, for Monday then, hopefully I'll be able to go over the answers to the midterm. The reason I say hopefully is there are 1 or 2 students in class who, for excused reasons, may not be able to take the exam by Sunday night. So obviously, if there's somebody who hasn't taken it yet and um, I don't want to go over the answers on the video. I'll give it all away. So, but I'm hoping I'll be able to go over the answers to the questions on the midterm so you can get an idea what I was looking for. I hate in an online class to just, send an email saying you got an 85% on your midterm, or you got a 95, or you got a 75, or you got a 60, and not really explain. Um, so I'll take a little bit of time in class. If not Monday, certainly next Thursday's video, I'll go over what I was looking for, what kind of answers I was looking for, so you can kind of compare it to what you wrote. And if you have any questions about your grade on your midterm after I've done that, then please, contact me and we can talk about it in more detail. And then also next week, we are going to get into our next major genre, which is fantasy. So I am going to ask you to read a little bit up on that for Monday's lecture. And then Charlotte's Web, I'm going to ask you to read for uh, next Thursday or before next Thursday's video. So we're going to take a look at fantasy starting next week. We'll start with Charlotte's Web, and then we will go to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Okay, so here it is, kind of laid out for you. Um, in addition to doing the midterm exam, I would like you to read in the Canvas. There's a file called Fantasy Notes. It sort of previews fantasy as a genre and touches on criteria we look for when we judge fantasy. And then also the other thing I want to talk about in Monday's video is I want to talk about the final paper that will be due the very end of the semester. I've mentioned it. I've talked about how much it's worth. I said I'd eventually explain what I'm asking you to do for that. So now I am going to talk about that. So usually around midterm time, I figure that's a good time to talk about the final exam. I'm sorry, the final paper. So there is a file in Canvas explaining that. So take a look at that. You don't have to write the paper, obviously, but look it over, and I will go over that on Monday as well. So that's what's coming up in Monday's edition of our class. All right, let's go to the midterm study guide that I asked you to look at, and I'll explain how it's going to be set up. And this is pretty much the same exam I give in my Tuesday, Thursday children's lit class in a normal semester. And they usually have, well, 75 minutes in a class period. So they have 75 minutes to take the exam. And like I said, you have a 24-hour window on Sunday to take it. And basically, the setup will be there will be 8 questions, short answer questions, that will be worth 10 points apiece. And then what I do is after I grade your midterm, and let's say you missed, I don't know, 5 points somewhere along the line. Let's say you missed 10 points, might be easier. And so basically your score is 70 out of 80. And then I will translate that using my handy calculator. I'll figure out what percentage that is out of 100, and then that will be your grade. Okay, so it'll be out of a percentage of 100, but there'll be 8 questions for a total of 80 points, but then we'll translate it into a percentage, if that makes sense. All right, short answer questions. Um, a lot of the questions will be what I call application type questions, which ask you to apply a concept or an idea or maybe criteria of a particular genre to a particular work or works that we have come across in this first half of the semester. All right. Um, so, just to toss out one, I might say, how does um, the Hunger Games use any four classical archetypes? So to answer that kind of question, you'd have to know what classical archetypes are and know some examples, and then be familiar enough with the Hunger Games to be able to apply the archetypes to the Hunger Games. So that would be a fair question to ask. Okay. Or I might ask you, what are any 4 or 5 benefits or criteria for excellent children's literature that we see in, and then say one of the fairy tales that I had you read in the collection. So to be able to answer that question, you would have to know what some of the basic criteria, general criteria and benefits for literature for kids, and then be able to apply it to a particular fairy tale or fairy tales that we covered. So that's what I mean by application questions. A lot of the questions are set up that way. Also, as I've already mentioned, there may be a couple of, well, why am I being coy? There may be, well, I'm just going to say there will be there will be a couple of questions regarding some of the articles that I've had you read in the Canvas or in the packet of the Canvas. And so basically, I would include the title and the author of the article, and then basically ask you a question like, what are 3 major points that are made in Shank's article, Why I Love Jennifer Lawrence? And then do you respond to those? How would you respond to those? Do you agree with his points, disagree, whatever? So that would be a fair question. So be, again, familiar with the articles that I'm going to ask you to be responsible for. I've had you read a number of articles, but as you'll see in the study guide, I narrowed it down to a few that I want you to review for the midterm. All right, so what are the kinds of things you're responsible for? we started off with this. What are some of the general values and benefits of literature for kids? This is our list of general criteria that we've used from the very beginning. There's a Canvas file on that, so familiarize yourself with those. Also be familiar with some of the trends in children's literature, and you'll see that in the packet section of the Canvas, page 15. Uh, be, uh, uh, be aware of the literature terms. And I went over these like the first day or two of class, I believe. It would be a fair question, for example, to ask you, I don't know, what are three examples of symbolism in the Hunger Games, for example? Um, so to answer, and again, that's a good application question. To be able to answer that question, you have to know what symbols are, and then be familiar enough with the story, The Hunger Games, to be able to come up with a few examples of symbols. All right, or what's the point of view in a particular story? And is it an effective one? So to answer that question, you'd have to know what the term point of view means, and then be able to apply it to, one of the works that we have talked about or covered. All right, so know your literature terms. Be familiar with the different ages and stages. We've tried to emphasize age appropriateness in all the different works that we've talked about so far, and we'll continue to do that throughout the course of the rest of the semester. Be familiar with different reasons why books are banned or challenged. I covered that this semester. And then generally evaluating children's fiction, a list of criteria that you could look at as well. So that's just the general things that we started with, particularly the general values and benefits that we apply to any work of children's literature, regardless of the genre. And then we started to get into particular genres, and we, of course, looked at picture books. So review this information in the Canvas. Page 39 in the packet, evaluating picture books. What are the criteria we look for when we judge a picture book? Also be familiar with the elements of art and the different styles of art. And by the way, don't confuse the two. So if you got a question like, what are any three elements of art and any four styles of art? And explain, don't get elements and styles confused. Sometimes students do that. And particularly take a look at styles of art in picture book, kind of outlines the different styles. And we kind of touched on that in our discussion. All right, so that's the information that you should be familiar with in regards to picture books. Be able to give criteria for evaluating picture books, be familiar with the different styles of art in picture books, and also the different elements that are used in picture books. All right, and then we moved into myth, folktale, and fairy tale. We talked about the different classical archetypes, so be familiar with those. I gave you notes on the myth that you should review again. And again, particular articles that deal with this, dealing with the hero myth, is the Seeger article on 70 to 73 in your packet, and the Joseph Campbell article, 74 to 79. So I think if you look over all of those different things, you'll be ready for anything I might ask you about mythology. Also be familiar with elements of a folk tale. What is a folk tale? What makes a story a folk tale and not a fairy tale, for example? And there is a Canvas article or a file on that. And we've gone over that last week, so take a look at that again. All right, as far as the Hunger Games go, be familiar with the different themes that we see in the Hunger Games, messages, lessons, morals to the story. There is an article that came from Goodreads that was very critical of the Hunger Games. That was one I assigned to you. I'd like you to review that again. What are some of the points that the person takes issue with the Hunger Games? Be able to answer that if I were to ask you that. Also be familiar with the different characteristics of dystopian fiction. All right, because obviously the Hunger Games is an example of that. And I went over that in a class lecture If you want to call what I do lecture, I don't know. Oh, by the way, I'm going to keep talking. How about a second number? 47. 47. I just get in love with the sound of my own voice and I forget to do the important stuff. So that's the second number, 47. All right, and then we went into fairy tales, and I gave you some notes on that, things to look for in fairy tales, common characteristics, conventions, and motifs of fairy tales. And then I asked you to do the fairy tale comparative analysis, where I ask you, do you see, certain conventions or motifs show up from one fairy tale to the next? And again, you guys did a nice job of that, and I'm going to be sharing these with you in a little bit. So be familiar with that. And then also, I had you read quite a few of the fairy tales in the Golden Book collection, but I've listed here the ones I want you to review in particular. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to ask you about, or I'm not going to want you to include in any of your answers about fairy tales. I don't want you to talk about Cinderella. I don't want you to write about Beauty and the Beast, and I don't want you to write about Little Red Riding Hood. Those are probably maybe the three most well-known fairy tales of all. And you probably know the plots of those stories, even without having taken the class or reading anything about them or reading the Golden Books collection. So be prepared for that. Um, Cinderella is obviously a classic choice. Beauty and the Beast is a classic choice. Little Red Riding Hood is a classic choice. Um, but I'm kind of giving you a heads up. Be ready to talk about or write about something other than that. So look over some of the other fairy tales and not those, because again, I could get a kid off the street and say, what are some great characteristics of fairy tales you see in Cinderella? And the kid, could probably answer that question without spending the tens of thousands of dollars you're spending for this class. So again, a little tip, um, look at some of the other ones that are less well known. Um, I think that was the benefit of that assignment, to go beyond the ones we're familiar with and read some ones that maybe we weren't familiar with and learn from them too. All right, so look over those particular fairy tales in the Golden Book collection. And then, of course, you are familiar with the student presentations, so read those. Those now are on Canvas, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. And then finally, I mentioned, there's a few articles that I've had you read in the Canvas or in the packet. Narrowed it down a little bit, but I would like you to review the Tahir article. Uh, so if I ask you a question about Tahir, I'd say, what are any three reasons why Katniss Everdeen is Tahir's hero? So basically asking you to summarize points in that article. There's another article called Five Lessons in Human Goodness in the Hunger Games. So if I picked out that essay to ask you about, I might ask you, what are any three of the five lessons in human goodness that he mentions? I also ask you to read a little bit about how Disney has damaged fairy tales over the years. And so I would review that. So if I were to ask you about that, I might say, what are any three ways Jones points out that Disney has damaged fairy tales in the last, well, God, we're getting into 100 years. I mean, Walt Disney, I think started in the 20s, right? And then I think the most recent article I wanted you to look at, Sparks, I thought wrote a really interesting article. We always talk about how fairy tales, the old fairy tales, are maybe too violent or too scary for kids today. But she makes some interesting points about why that may be a good thing. So if you haven't read that article, or if you did recently, that's another one I'd like you to review. All right, so those are the particular articles that you should be ready for the midterm. And then my final advice to you, little teacher humor, stay alive, you know. I've been very pleased with the level of work that's been done as far as the different assignments I've given you that you've turned in. I've been very, very impressed by the written presentations so far. Like I said, I haven't gotten to the fairy tale, folktale, myth presentations yet, but just taking a quick peek at them, they also look very strong. Everybody is kind of, I think just about everybody has kept up and done a wonderful job. And I guess one of the benefits of a summer class where everything's gone really fast and you cover a lot of material in 2 or 3 weeks like we've done, you don't have too many memory lapses because, I'll be asking you things that, the latest, I'll be asking you things that happened only like 2 weeks ago instead of like, 8 weeks ago, which is what happens in a regular midterm for a regular class. So we're talking about a 15-week class and I give the midterm in week 8 or 9. Then you say, well, God, what did he cover in week 1? That's 7 weeks ago. But in a class like this, it might have been, last week. So hopefully a lot of this stuff is still fresh in your head and you'll be able to cover it. All right, so that is the midterm exam. And let me give you another number. I want to get caught up on my numbers. 55. 55 is our third number. All right, the next thing I wanted to do, just real quickly, is to show you the presentations that students have done in our first two genre categories. So these are posted in Canvas. And so here are the written presentations for picture books. And so please read these. And again, they were very well done. So we have Miranda's, we have Zoe's, we have Lauren's, we have Anna's, and we have Courtney's. So read those, familiarize yourself with the plot of the story, and particularly how it meets criteria for judging picture books. That would be the kind of question I would ask you about that. Oh, also, I'm kind of hoarse this morning. Excuse me. One thing that could probably go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If there's a question on presentations that's open-ended and you can give your own example of a student presentation and write about it. Obviously, if you were one of the presenters, you can't you can't choose your own presentation to write about in the midterm. I would expect you to ace a question on your presentation because you wrote it. So you can't write about your own presentation. So anyway. So these are posted in Canvas. And again, very well done. And then I haven't had a chance to grade these yet, but I did want to make sure I posted them as soon as possible so you'd have a chance to read them. And here are our student presentations in the myth, folktale, fairy tale category. And there's Connor's and Marin. And Naira, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Claire. And as you can see, we have two on the same story. So you'll get a pretty comprehensive look at Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief, between the two presentations. I didn't think this would happen because we have such a small group. Usually in a big group, I usually ask people to, once they know what group they're in, to give me their tentative title so that if there are duplicates, I might ask somebody to do a different one. I didn't think we need to do that because we have a small class, but here we do have two on the same work, which is okay. It's not like I'm going to penalize the students or anything. You'll get a really good comprehensive look at Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. So anyway, so those are where you will find these right in our canvas, right in the same area that we've been going. So, you scroll down. I try to do them all, everything in order so we can keep going. So you'll see those. Let me take you now to your answers to the fairy tale comparative analysis that we did last week. And again, I thought the answers were very, very good. Uh, you guys are really, I mean, gone above and beyond. And I really have enjoyed reading these, and the analysis is very good. I pat myself on the back. I think I give pretty good questions. I think I give pretty good leading questions for you to dig into. And I think by answering the questions, it helps establish and I guess reestablish uh, the criteria and the basic foundation I gave you, and then you go and you see these things play out, these criteria, these characteristics play out in individual stories. And so I think it's a good 1-2 punch. I kind of give you the information, the things to look for, and then you go and look for them and you find them. And your answers have been very, very good. And so I put this up for FYI. And again, I'm not going to ask you a midterm question on like the homework writing assignments. I just put these up in lieu of having a class discussion. If we were in a classroom, we would probably take 45 minutes to talk a little bit about this and your answers to these questions. But we can't do that. Um, but again, in each case, I ask you about the common elements in each of these stories that you see. Um, I ask you if they had similar themes or morals. And then I think this is the one I'll kind of focus on as kind of a review and wrap up of fairy tales. I asked you what you thought was the best, perhaps, quote unquote, overall example of a fairy tale, maybe one that you thought had most, if not all, of the uh, conventions and motifs of fairy tales. And um, so Olivia said, okay, Beauty and the Beast. I'm not going to disagree with you. And she gives really good reasons why, but I'm not going to ask you about Beauty and the Beast in the midterm. So one vote for Beauty and the Beast. Sophia, again, excellent analysis here. She also chose Beauty and the Beast. Okay. Again, no argument there. But again, that's a story that you guys are familiar with, probably seen. Well, there's been two versions of it, hasn't there? And some of you have probably seen both versions of those. Many of you did point out some of the weaknesses or issues with some of these stories in modern day times, and I appreciated that. Now, Naira chose Thumbelina as her example of the best overall. Sounds like the Oscar award. And winner for the best fairy tale is here are the nominees and whatever. I didn't mean it to be that way, but it just occurred to me it's kind of like that. So Naira liked Thumbelina. Kara, again, Beauty and the Beast. All right, Mac, excellent evaluation of the different qualities and characteristics in fairy tales and how we see them in these stories. And again, I don't know if you noticed this or really thought about it until we covered it, but I think you'll every time you read a fairy tale from now on, or maybe even see them in more modern day stories, you'll begin to recognize these motifs and conventions. And again, children will too. I mean, once you talk about these and you point them out to them, then they'll get it too. And I think it adds to our enjoyment of stories to look at these and spot them and identify them and see how they work and see and ask yourself, why are these so effective? Why is the rule of three so common? Why does that work? You know? Um, so, that's the kind of thing that we can analyze in a college class, and then it'll carry over into our everyday enjoyment of this literature. And again, most of these stories have messages, themes, lessons, morals to the stories. So even though they may be hundreds of years old, the message still is timeless. Um, I'm scrolling down and I forget. Oh yeah, Mac. Mac really liked um, the Wild Swans. And here is Mac's uh, explanation for that. And again, it's an opinion question. There's no right or wrong answer. Just as long as you didn't say Shrek, you were safe. And Mac uh, kept Mac would not bring up Shrek. I think they learned their lesson. So um, interesting, Cinderella, by some standards, many people say, well, that's the classic fairy tale, but it's notice that Mac had some issues with Cinderella, as many people do today, and for some very good reasons. Right, Lydia. Lydia says Cinderella is a good choice, but she also chose the Wild Swans. Has many qualities of a fairy tale, yet also has a protagonist who shows the power of perseverance. So that's a good point. And Lydia says Little Red Riding Hood may be a little bit dated and problematic. All right, Claire. Excellent analysis of characteristics and qualities. Now she did pick Cinderella. Certainly has a lot of the elements of a classic fairy tale. Now, whether the overall storyline, is maybe a little bit dated or problematic, well, that's for us to decide on our own. Like I said, it's an opinion question, but it's a question that we raise in a class like this. And there was a problem with the one about the Bremen musicians. Also, the ugly duckling might be problematic. All right, Connor? Connor liked Puss in Boots. And I like Puss in Boots too. I don't know if it's the classic fairy tale, but I've always enjoyed Puss in Boots. Uh, and I think any cat lover or cat, I don't want to say cat owner because they own you. Let's face it, we don't own cats. Uh, but I like stories with cats in them. What can I say? I like stories with dogs in them. I like stories with animals in general, but cats particularly. And Connor had a real problem with donkey skin. Um, Frog Princess is also a bit demeaning. Miranda, oh, let me give you another number before I forget. How about 62, 62, 62. All right, Miranda, again, evil mothers, talking animals, works and chores, curses, just among the many common characteristics and motifs. Again, Cinderella is mentioned as the classic, but again, I'm not going to ask you about Cinderella on the midterm. So, and Frog Princess. There are issues with the Frog Princess. So, according to Miranda. Anam, interesting how a lot of these stories have similar themes and messages as well, morals to the story. Again, Anam picks Cinderella. I don't know. Have you seen both versions? Have you seen the live action version? Emma Watson. Emma Watson was in that, wasn't it? Wasn't she in that? Um, that's something you could share with me on an email when you send something back to me. Um, did you enjoy? Well, this is a good blanket question. Maybe we'll have time to talk about this sometime. Maybe on Monday, I'll bring this up. Well, I'm going to be talking about paper topic ideas, and one great paper topic idea is to compare the original literature to, well, I guess I should flip it around. Compare the movie version of a work for children to the original work and talk about um, how good of an adaptation it is. And maybe it's a terrible adaptation. Um, Maybe they got everything wrong. They changed things, they added things, they cut things. They, the casting was terrible. The animation was bad. If there were songs that, I mean, I think sometimes it's more fun to write a paper where you can talk about how your favorite children's book was totally ruined by a media version. So we'll talk more about that as a topic and other topics on Monday. But you might start thinking about that. That usually ends up being a very popular paper topic because I think we've all had that experience. We loved this book and we couldn't wait for it to come out in a movie form. And then when it did, it was like, oh my God, what did you do? I know a lot of people feel that way about the original Percy Jackson movie. Although I hear that there's now now it's a TV series, which is getting better reviews. So you might tell me about that. What are among your favorite media adaptations of works that you experienced as a kid? And maybe what are some of your least favorite? Um, I think that's a very good solid paper topic to write about. Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella are both dated and problematic. All right, Marin, again, Cinderella. And it still lives up to its reputation. But again, it is so much the obvious choice maybe and the most well-known choice that I won't be asking you about it in the midterm. And she thought Sleeping Beauty is a bit dated. And any story that has as its main character a young female who has to wait for somebody to rescue her or awaken her with a kiss or whatever, I don't know, it's not very empowering. But some of these stories maybe have strengths other than weaknesses in that kind of plot that might make them still valuable. Because notice, a number of you said that you thought Cinderella was problematic, but a number of you said, "Oh, that's the classic tale. It still holds up." So, it's a matter of opinion. Lauren, Beauty and the Beast. So again, very good choice, but I won't ask you about it on the exam. Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella are outdated, according to her. Bailey liked the Frog Princess. So that's a different choice. And I agree with her. I love that story. And Caitlin, Beauty and the Beast as the best example. Um, and Caitlin had problems with Sleeping Beauty. Also had problems with Puss in Boots. So, one of my favorites. So I guess I'll have to fail Caitlin. It's a joke. It's just a teacher joke. No, actually, there are 18 of you, and I have to meet my quota of 3 Fs for the class. So I'm currently working that out, which 3 students are going to fail. I think anybody who brought up Shrek is probably on the list, first of all. Um, okay, it's just a joke. All right, just want to see if you're paying attention. Speaking of that, let me give you another number, 63, 63. I'll give you that number. And Teresa, again, Cinderella, best example of a fairy tale. Oops, she didn't answer that question. Okay, so well done analysis. We had some favorites that were mentioned several times, which I guess speaks to their timelessness. but also some controversy. I mean, I think you could probably see issues with each one of these in one way or another. But I liked the fact that some of you picked some of the least lesser obvious ones, and gives us a well-rounded look at different fairy tales, and not just the ones we kind of have known since we were kids. And then finally, let's take a look at folk tales. I ask you to look over some YouTube versions of these well-known folk tales. I thought that would be kind of interesting, a nice little change from reading, because let's face it, a lot of kids learn about folk tales or experience folk tales or fairy tales not so much through the written form, excuse me, but also through media. And I thought a lot of these were maybe very, very effective ways of telling a story, because most fairy tales and folk tales are relatively short. That's one of the attractions they have for children. And so you can show the whole story in a 3 or 4 or 5 minute video with animation. And that can be a very effective way to uh, share some really, really old stories. And again, for all the different reasons I brought up last time, the different values and benefits of reading stories uh, from different lands and different cultures and different time periods, um, they're invaluable for so many different reasons, including teaching empathy and living vicariously through these people from different places, and also learning a little bit about other cultures or about your own culture. I mean, we all come from somewhere, as I mentioned the other day. So it's one of the lasting values of folk tales. So let me just kind of go over those I compiled. And again, I may not have gotten to everybody. I had a few come in a little bit late. And anyway, you can read all of the information. Again, you guys did a wonderful job of the analysis. And again, prompted by my brilliant questions. So I'm going to always take a little bit of credit for your brilliance, because otherwise, why am I here if not to take credit? So I just thought it would be fun. Um, One of the reasons I had you do the 2 line rhyme is that it'd be a nice way to just summarize each story. And then also, if we do that, when we do this in class, I always like to have the students, do a brief little mini presentation of the folk tale they chose, and then they share their 2 line reason, their two line rhyme. And um, with my tongue firmly in cheek, kind of like what I do with Shrek, I usually mock them unmercifully for how bad their 2 line rhymes are. It's not an easy thing to do. You think, oh, that's easy to do. But then when you try to do it, it's not so easy to summarize a story in 2 lines. So I usually mock them unmercifully. I won't do that uh, online here, because you're not here to defend yourself or throw something at me or curse me out. So I'll just kind of read them. Um, Marin did the legend of Princess Yeniga, and Princess Yeniga runs away from her father to find her own fate. She then discovers Burkina Faso and is honored to this date. That's really, really, really average. Well, see, I'm joking. See, it's a joke. It's a joke. I'm just kidding, Marin. Don't drop the class. Uh, don't report me. Don't don't write a bad review on rate my ratemyprofessor.com. Actually, it's not bad. And then Stone Soup. I was surprised, but this seemed to be the favorite. It seemed like people came back to this again. I had a lot of people do Stone Soup. So this is the rhyme to remember. A soldier was hungry and acquired a stone. With it, he made soup and was never alone. That's uh, that's pretty mediocre. No, I'm kidding. That's actually pretty good. I'm just giving you a hard time. Like I said, I usually do this in class, and I make fun of students, because otherwise, why am I here if not to make fun of students? All right, here is Naira. She did the star fruit tree. And I think she left off the two-line rhymes. And then why koala has a stumpy tail. If you notice, a lot of these folk tales are origin stories or help explain something unexplainable. They kind of go back to mythology for that particular device. Anam did Urashima, one from Japan. I hope you enjoyed the wide variety of stories from different lands. And again, this can be so educational as well as entertaining to children to learn about other cultures. Here was the line, here was Anam's rhyme to remember. Urashima the kind, as time went on, he was left behind. It's kind of sad, isn't it? And then also another one on the legend of Princess Yanaga. A strong princess with a mighty soul, she broke the rules to take on her new role. That's uh, that's really okay. Usually by this time, students will yell out, "Well, why don't you come up with one, you smartass?" And I say, "Well, that's not my job. My job is to make you do the two-line rhymes, and my job is to make fun of them." All right, but actually, that's pretty good. All right, Bailey did the Hidden Feast, and she might have misunderstood the two-line rhyme a little bit. Oh no, she didn't. Okay, I'm sorry. Greedy rooster missed his treat because he rushed to skip his seat. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And the one about the cuckoo, cuckoo gave her voice away to help the seeds grow every day. Now, damn it, that's a good. Those are two good rhymes there. Well done. All right, Connor also did the star fruit tree from Vietnam. Here's the rhyme. Well, at least Connor admits to sucking at rhymes. I didn't think it was that bad. Love what you have, for if you desire more, there will be a whole lot to lose in store. And then one from Hungary, the wolf's joke. Let me give you another number. I'm going to sneak one in. 75. 75. And then here was Connor's rhyme for that. Be careful with whom you place your trust, because they will betray you if they must. See, not all the lessons are uplifting. I mean, I mean, that's some of them have to do with the evils out there that you have to deal with in life. Sophia, the man who never lied, from Africa. Mahmad was a smart and honest man who found a loophole in any liar's plan. That's pretty good. That sums up the story very concisely in two lines, and it rhymes. Very good. All right, again, stone soup. The stone soup had plenty of flavor to spare. Once the selfish and greedy could be persuaded to share. Okay. Another one on Princess Yanega. I think I've pronounced it three different ways. I think that's what it is. So that was one of the more popular ones too. Beautiful and powerful warrior, her heart she chose to follow. Princess Yenega, mother of the Masi people of Burkina Faso. Now, follow and Faso, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, Miranda. Well, I guess songwriters get away with this all the time. Maybe not a strict rhyme. It doesn't strictly rhyme, but it's close enough. And then here's one, an origin tale. Why koala has a stumpy tail. The tale of the koala is not one to forget. If you're lazy and selfish, you'll feel regret. All right, Lauren Stark also did stone soup and the star fruit tree. Mac also did stone soup. So you guys will learn a lot about stone soup. A man wanders claiming to make soup with a stone, and his neighbors remember they are not alone. Pretty good. And then avoiding the mud. I'm glad somebody picked this one. I thought this was unusual. And this is one that I was not familiar with until I came upon it. So, um, Hasidic Jewish folktale. A rich rabbi and a poor rabbi meet along the road. The poor rabbi has knowledge in which he bestowed. All right, another one on the hidden feast, and also on cuckoo, the Mexican folktale. For the hidden feast, don't judge a meal by what you see, or you might start looking like the rooster. Silly. I don't know. That one made me laugh. It made me laugh again. See and silly. All right. Uh, and Cuckoo. Cuckoo was vain, caring more about her pretty words until she saved the seeds for the other birds. Good, good. Most of these are not half bad, but some of them are not half good either. No, I'm kidding. Um, Claire, the fairy who cried gems from India. The boy finds a fairy with gems as tears, and she helps him fight away all his fears. Good. And the wolf's joke from Hungary. The wolf wanted something fat to eat. This endeavor caused his untimely defeat. Good. These are good. Olivia did Paul Bunyan, one of our many American folk tales, which you're probably familiar with. Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue make up a hard-working crew, paving the way for the Great Lakes for me and you. Wow, that's pretty impressive. And then I think I ended, yeah, this was I ended with this one because it probably had my favorite two-line rhyme. She also dealt with the greedy hunter from Nigeria. And this was the two-line rhyme. Don't be greedy like Orizu, for you can end up in animal poo. I mean, how can you top that? How can you top that? Any 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 poem that has the word poo in it is automatically at the top of my list. All right. So again, very well done. You can read the particulars. Some of them came up more often than others. It was interesting. The stone soup was pretty popular. Um, but I hope the experience of looking through these, I hope you just didn't pick the first two that came up. I hope you kind of looked over them and most of you picked a good pairing, like two totally different stories from two totally different places. That's what I was kind of hoping for. So you could become familiar with the folk tales from different regions and learn from them and enjoy them as children would as well. And again, a lot of them have messages and morals that are timeless for kids even in 2025, uh, where we are today. All right, that's all I have for today. I gave you the numbers. The main thing then for the weekend, I do want you to read up a little bit on fantasy, read the fantasy notes file in Canvas. Uh, do take a quick look at the file that goes over potential final paper topics. That'll be something I'll talk about on Monday. But obviously, your main uh, goal, your main task, as it were, for the weekend is to take the midterm exam. And again, I will have it posted on Saturday at midnight. It will be up and running until Sunday midnight, where I will unpublish it. And so you'll have all that time to take it and then email it to me. Word document, please, also with the numbers and sequence of this video. And then we'll go on from there. So have a wonderful weekend. Good luck on your exam and stay alive. Stay alive. Thank you.